on the screen it says Mary Mota. That's my maiden name, which was my father's name, who was Comanche. And Mota means like your nose is plugged, which is a funny name. Weahkee means the tingle of a little bell. So both names have a meaning. I'm named after my grandma Mary, who was one of the last Comanche medicine women for the Comanche Nation. Tsanapia was her Indian name, Eagle Woman. So that would be my name on that side. Nananyaka is how I would tell you if you were Comanche. My grandma from my Pueblo side gave me my name, or my grandpa named me Awetsawe, which means, like right now you see all that purple aster. If there was a whole field of them, it would be the way that blue purple hue looks. That's my name. Not so much the purple aster, but the way it looks, the blue on the ground. So I always say I'm purple haze. So I assume everybody watched the turkey feather blanket video, a little bit about it. I have that blanket here with me. So this blanket, again, when I started making it, it was an objective to wanting to find out how the prehistoric Pueblo people manufactured these blankets because they were so valuable. So in the starting research, I knew how to spin cordage. So the interior of the blanket is actually this yucca cordage, and each yucca is harvested, and each one of these yucca plants has anywhere from 120 leaves to 180 leaves. So I was really choosy about how long I wanted it, because the longer the leaf, the more the length of the fiber, desirable fiber I was going to need. So once I harvest the plant, there's a proper way to harvest, by the way. And a lot of people think that you get a shovel or you get a knife and you cut the bottom out. But once you do that, you harm the root. And if you want to save the root for shampoo, you can do that. You can take the shovel and dig it out, but you take a chance on that cactus not coming back where it was born from. That's how we call it. Only the female plants are harvested. I mean, the male plants are harvested. So when you look at these plants, see, a lot of people don't know that there's a man plant and a woman plant. So you got to open up the center and you go, oh, that's a girl, and you close it back up, and then you go, then oh, here's a boy, and you take him. So I think the reason why the Pueblo people or decided to do this was to ensure that we wouldn't exhaust these plants. So it was decided that only the males would be taken. In looking at each leaf of these plants, you can tell how much you can get out of it. Like this skinny little one right here, this is about 30 feet of cordage. I've gotten so good at spinning and understanding the yucca that I can talk to it and say, okay, today we're going to make a pair of shoes, so I only need 16 to 20 feet, so you should be fine enough for me to do. And then I take it. So you get it and you twist it off the main plant, and then it pops right off, because you don't see the root, right? Now the root is valuable because in itself, it has properties that can be used for your hair, for your clothing, for your bath, for taking off inflammation and swelling. It has so much property. So you didn't need all of it at once, but you have to harvest it fresh and then peel the outside bark. Which what I'm talking about is this dark outside skin off of this root. And you want to expose this white looking pulpy substance in here, and that's what you pulverize. But when you harvest it, clean it right away, slice it like you would potatoes, lay it on a newspaper. That way it's easier to process. So all of this technology and all of this knowledge, it gets passed down, but it's going away. And I'm blessed to have the opportunity to go into Pueblo villages like Zuni and Hopi and learn from the old people and ask, so how is this done? And is it still done? And do we still use these items? So far, for uh, hair and things like that, nobody uses it for soap, for washing their clothing. Some people in Hopi still try to use it to wash kilts because it doesn't hurt the color or shrink items. It takes the oils out. So when you're dancing, you have all that paint that absorbs your oils and stains the fabric, makes it white again. So it's really a cool use of a root. Um, be careful which roots you choose. When you, if you use this on your hair, this is the narrow leaf, which is the plant I just showed you, which is this one. This will make your head itch. So if you use the yucca baccata, which is the big broadleaf, the Spanish dagger, that's the root you want to use on your hair. But be careful, like I said, if you're going to experiment with it. Um, when we're born in the village, 3 days after you're born, you're given a bath. And one of the things they do is they shampoo your hair. That they say so that you don't grow bald when you get older. Your hair stays, thick, like you, because you don't ever want to have a cold head or you'll get sick. Um, so yucca was used for a lot of things, and it's really fun to listen to my grandma when she would use it or she would talk about string in general. Uh, it's like this whole conversation. You don't waste anything, right? So cotton was hard to get. Yucca is free. So you have a choice. Um, Now you're not seeing anything made of yucca except for baskets, and they're not really made for everyday use like winnowing corn or rinsing out things anymore. They're decoration. And what I'm trying to bring back is the utilitarian use of yucca, like these pot rings. I learned how to weave. This is my very first pot ring I made. It's a very special weave, and the Zuni are really the saved the technology. It was found in some of the cave age structures in Santa Clara. They're made a little bit different. And then looking at some of the samples in other museums, you see these pot rests. It wasn't so that you could put the pottery on top of it. It was so that you could save your head from being smashed by 50 pounds of water as you're walking with an oya on your head. The other thing is when you're carrying hot soup to the kiva, you're not scalding your head. So the Pueblo forgot this and they started making rings with their dish towels. Well, their heads would burn. So this is coming back to the Zuni. The other thing it was used for, and a lot of people don't think about this, is we had a drum. So when the women were grinding corn, um, doing all the hard work. The men were hanging back, singing, smoking, okay, y'all done yet? But they would put this big pottery on the top up here. And we noticed that these pots had wear in the same direction, but only on one side. So we're looking at it, and then we realized that they were putting this drum up here, this drum made of pottery with a buckskin over it and filled with water. And when they're drumming and the women are grinding corn, so it's a beat that's for you to use, ho hey ho hey. It would go on, and then the next his arm got tired, and instead of like him stopping, they can't stop the beat because there's we're all grinding away, so they want to keep us in that beat so we don't stop, and the women are tagging out at the same time once you're getting tired. It's really a cool thing to see and be a part of. So here's this guy, and he would take his foot and he would push the drum to the next drummer and keep drumming until that guy picked up his beat. And then pretty soon, this ring with this drum on it would go all the way around to all the drummers. So that is how we figured out the wear pattern on these rings. And this ring is designed so that it is a shock absorber. See it pushing down? So it's taking up, like a shock absorber. So this type of weave is coming back. It's been lost for hundreds of years. And the same is going to apply to this turkey feather blanket manufacturing process. Basketry has been around. I keep this basket because I keep it unfinished, because you see the finished part, but you don't really see how it was made. See how many leaves? So when I'm gathering to make a basket, I don't cut the scoop off. I keep it because at some point it's going to become a lock. And when I'm making yucca cordage, I cut the scoop and I disarm the tip. So different ways are made. I don't know if you can see the pattern. This is a diamond within a diamond within a diamond. Can you see the inside of that? So these diamond designs are actually coming from the south and making their way up. And you're going to start to see diamond patterns, water patterns in the clothing and the textile, as well as baskets. So once baskets go away, nobody's making yucca baskets anymore, but the design is remembered and it's painted and carved onto the pottery. So that's another thing you can look at, when you're thinking about yucca, how far back yucca goes. The memory of yucca is not forgotten. The story's still told in some of the pottery patterns and also textile patterns. But I I chose turkey feather blanket first of all because I had spun so much yucca, and like I said, I looked at collections and studied, and all of a sudden, creator says, "Okay, what is your problem with having to make this blanket?" It wasn't so much collecting the yucca and spinning it and making it. That was the simple part. The hard part is collecting feathers, because we don't have the opportunity, or we don't have 2,000 birds. So if you look at archaeological assemblages within Pueblo systems, they had herds of turkey. It's their first domesticated animal besides the dog. And they used that dog hair as well in a lot of their textiles. So hair, even human hair, was used in textile. But this turkey was not the first to be used as a blanket material or a clothing material. It was actually rabbits. So rabbits, it would be this little rabbit here. If you look at the size of the pelt, and y'all that grew up and remember the 60s, everybody had that rabbit fur jacket that we all thought was cool. Okay, so that was the same way. I mean, so you're looking at what you have, what's available to you in your environment. And back in around 1112, there really weren't any turkeys. Well, actually, they start coming in, but it's that popular item. I need that. I want to have a turkey feather blanket. I'm tired of rabbit fur, that kind of thing. It's like when Walmart moved in, Sears went away. It was terrible. And so it's the same kind of ideology along with the Pueblos. You think word doesn't travel from one village to the other? Boy, man, it gets around, believe me. So this rabbit fur at first was very popular. So they would take this rabbit, and instead of taking it in strips like this, they would make one whole piece of material, stripping in 1/4 inch thick strips, and then winding it around the yucca cordage. you know, like this. So when they did this, see how it's winding up? What's it doing once I wound it up? It's actually standing up the fur. So when you get cold, what happens to your fur? It stands up because you have these really cool little muscles that make that happen. But once the animal is dead, the fur just lays flat. And you're also looking at it, wow, how did they figure that out? So they figured out that if they cut this rabbit fur in strips and wound it around the yucca cordage, it's standing up and it's creating a foil that's keeping your warm air close to your body. Okay. So once they understood this part of the physics of the situation, they were able to take this, and if you look at this turkey feather, it's just flat. How are you going to make that fur stand up? So what they did is they were soak this and then wet it and make it pliable, and then it would wind. See how it's standing up? Now I've got this standing up. The problem is the birds themselves. Without having 2,000 birds, one single bird yields anywhere from 1,200 feathers to 2,700, depending on the age, the sex, and the species. So there's two turkeys here, the Rio Grande and Merriam's. The Rio Grande becomes the domesticated turkey in the Southwest, and he, comes all the way from South America. So Peru had turkey. They're trading it into the Aztec. The Aztec then move it up into the northern territory, and voila, we have herds of turkey. They're easy to domesticate. We grow corn. They feed on mainly corn. We let them into our fields. They become our pesticide. So they're killing all the grasshoppers or any invasives that are, going to take out our valuable corn crops and our vegetables. So these turkeys not only become your domestic animal, they're your helpers. They're the guardians to your fields. They're also fertilizing at the same time. So they had huge pens. And if you've ever worked with poultry, if you train them really well and you're a good mom and dad, all you have to do is have a certain call or bang on a bucket, and boy, they all come running into the coop and they know it's time to go to bed. So I would think these turkeys did the same thing because they're pretty smart. A lot of people, they may drown in the water, but I've seen Matt do that too. So but these turkeys, that's why people used to say, God, you're such a turkey, because the myth was that they stand up and look straight into the rain and they drown. But they're really kind of smart. And working with these birds, like I said, making friends at Fort Sill, having the opportunity to harvest as the feathers that were choice. And everybody says, well, they must have been the breast feathers. To tell you the truth, those were pretty small. The more desirable feathers, the feathers that you want, were the feathers that were around the thighs. Of course, that's where the hen sits on the clutch of eggs, but there aren't very many. The second desirable place was how many of you know turkey anatomy, or at least seen one from afar or a picture? Your Thanksgiving turkey? Okay. So when a male preens, his tail goes up, right? Which is this feather. And right above his tail, as he goes up and he turns sideways, there's that hump of feathers. Those are nice. Those are his preening feathers. Of course, the Jenny, she don't have those, but he has it. So when I had the opportunity out at Fort Sill, I got to see the number of feathers I could harvest from a male 6-year-old or a male 10-year-old. Turkeys don't have that much of a lifespan. Their lifespan in domestic is 10 years. In the wild, it's 3 to 7. So the opportunity to see, turkeys at a different age was beautiful. Of course, these were dead and down. Turkeys molt in their lifetime only 10 times. And in that lifetime, they probably molt just the wing feathers and the tail feathers. Rare if they get rid of their body. But because the way the turkey's designed, he is able to be plucked year round. He has a little pore that the feather goes into, and this is his defense mechanism. So when a coyote comes along and he grabs that turkey, this pore opens up and he'll release whatever, a mouthful of feathers for that predator, whatever's grabbing him, and he can run away. They're not quite flightless. They roost in high places. So when you have a turkey, you want to make sure you have him at least a 3-foot roost or higher, and he'll sit up in those trees. And so when I had this chance to pluck birds while they were still warm, I noticed one thing. The difference between plucking a bird that from a pelt and plucking from a bird that still had um, a blood surging through it, the feathers came out so easy out of that pelt that the guy just shot compared to one that's been sitting in my freezer, and it was easier to remove those feathers. And one of the other allies that I made friends with was the New Mexico Game and Fish, and I made friends with them. I went over and took my feather blanket and said, "Hey, you know what? I need more than these feathers to create anything you can do for me." So the biologist said, "You know what? Tomorrow we're going to Raton to capture birds on a golf course because they're invasive." And I said, "Really? Isn't it going to snow tomorrow?" "Well, that's your chance to get birds." Well, man, I left crack of dawn, got up there, and they captured 68 birds. And with these big nets, boom, blasted and covered these nets. And one thing I understood when I was watching all of this, and we're running like crazy people, and all these rangers are all holding birds. One of the things I wanted to look at was to actually look in that little pore once I pulled the feather to see what, if it closed, if it stayed open, if it bled, look at the turkey's face to see if it hurt him. There were so many things running through my mind. Well, when it was opened up, boy, right there, just on the edge, was another feather ready to come out. So it took, when I asked the biologist, he says once they lose a feather, it takes 2 to 3 days, and poof, they got another feather coming out. And it'll be encased in a little white meniscus, and then it'll fluff out. He'll rub it till it comes off. So and I says, that bird didn't even flinch, and I was taking some pretty, lift up their poor tail and really plucking away. Um, it was interesting. And then what helped was there were juveniles in that batch. So I compared the juvenile fletch, which was 6 months of age, and theirs was not robust and not very desirable. So I separated them in buckets. Then I went to the jennies, which are the females, and I noticed that the older, around the legs, they had the best feathers. That's when I figured out, okay. But then that big Tom boy, I could go to town on that one bird all day. But I said, oh, I better not leave him naked because it was winter. So I took what I wanted off of him. But what I did was, that evening when I went home, instead of putting these feathers in the freezer, I put them in water and I started winding. And what came out of that was that those were the best feathers to wind right away, because this dry feather, I have to soak this for about maybe anywhere from 15 minutes to 2 hours to make that quill pliable or it'll crack. With that other one, it was 7 minutes and it was ready. So that lifeblood was still in that quill. I think they call it a barber. But anyway, um, this feather, learning about how to use feathers was a journey that I didn't think I was going to take, but I did, and I accepted what Creator wanted me to see. So the next batch of birds that were coming all the way from Grants and Zuni, and there was a hunter who probably sent me probably 8 birds, and they were frozen. So they'd come, and I'd have to thaw out that bird, go in the backyard, and I started counting the feathers, because how can I tell somebody from reading a book how many feathers a bird can carry if I didn't pluck a whole bird myself? So that's how I got that data saying I can confidently say that a bird will give you anywhere from 1,200 desirable, one bird. And what I mean by desirable, man, there were different sizes of bird feathers that are coming out of this one bird. Um, all the tail feathers went to the medicine people. All the wing feathers went to people who make weaponry like arrows and atlatl darts. Um, all the small feathers, really small turkey fluffs, went to the medicine people because I know I have one somewhere. Anyway, the so that when you watch Pueblo dances, you notice like these little tiny feathers on the tips of deer dents, or sometimes you see them ornate on buffalo horn headdresses. This represents a cloud, a rain cloud. So they're calling the rain, and when it's tied on a string, it makes it, it really makes the cloud move. So the symbolism behind these feathers was also something that I knew about from my Pueblo grandparents. So when you see these feathers on headdresses or tablitas, they represent those dark, juicy rain clouds that we know is going to produce, right? That's what this represents. Um, One of the things in working with these birds and collecting data, I learned that there were 2 varieties. So that Merriam, it's a wild variety, and that bird comes along once all the pueblos are disassembled, and the Spaniards come in and the pueblos get taken apart. Well, so do their animals. So you have these feral birds going in, and they're all over, and they're called Merriam turkeys, and they have a white tip on the edge of their see that little white tip, and this is that domestic. Now, when these come up from Mexico, like I explained in the video, they have that iridescent color. They're golden and they're worshipped there. They're like gods. Over here, it's like it's only God on the table. Oh my God, look at the size of that bird. Oh my God, look how delicious it looks. So here, the feather is what's important. The Pueblo didn't really eat their birds until around 13, 14 because of that drought. Now they're hurting for food. So now you find, um, some juvenile bird bones in a lot of the Pueblo hearths and some of the assemblages, saying, indicating that they did eat their birds. But before that, it was too valuable to eat. You figure everybody in the Pueblo had one of these feather blankets. So each village had anywhere from 1,000 to 5,000 occupants. And when you're first born, you get a baby blanket. The good thing about these yucca blankets, I mean, having yucca as a rib or an underlying, is that you can always add more cordage to this end. See, it's all I would have to do to add to this cordage is take it apart, unspin it, soak this, and then start adding cordage to it. So at the end of this blanket, if I wanted it bigger, I'd just untie it and make it bigger. So this blanket could grow with you. So you're born and you're given a turkey feather blanket. When you're ready to go to the other side, you're wrapped in it. So it becomes your birthing blanket, and it goes with you as your blanket when you pass on. And we still wrap our people in blankets. We don't put them in a coffin. They're wrapped and sewn in a blanket and then put into the ground. And I think that comes from when we were, living back up in the cave structures. Um, so these turkey feather blankets, that's why it became so valuable. And being able to make one and then take it into the Pueblo villages and see the look on the children's faces and the elders' faces is probably one of the most beautiful feelings, of joy, because they only hear about them in stories. They've never seen one. And to be able to let them touch it and wear it and, you know, feel how warm it is and how beautiful it could be if we could go back and redo these blankets for each other. It's just this is what I'm trying to pass on. This is what I'm trying to give back to the villages. So I spend a lot of time going into you know, my village at Santa Clara, working through the library and the education outreach program. And then I go into Navajo Nation and I teach them about the blankets. And then I go San Ildefonso, Zuni, so I'm kind of moving all over the place. Cochiti, I've got a project coming up with them pretty soon on actually working with these blankets and other yucca textiles. My time in Oaxaca, I talked with some of the elders and said, well, I saw their turkeys, and these turkeys were like their pets. They would sit on their feet or they would, get up and look at their owner and then, you know, and I said, can I see your bird? Yeah. And you want to buy it? I'll sell it to you. No, 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 I don't want to eat it. I just want to see it. And and she says, well, in Spanish, ¿qué quiere? What do you want? And I said, I want the feathers. The feathers. If you want feathers, you can come to my house and pick them up off the ground all you want, she told me. And I said, well, and then I started telling them about the blankets, the turkey feather blankets. And she said, we only have stories about that. We've never seen one. And and someone said, well, told that lady, this woman makes them. And she goes, oh. And so then I stood there and I plucked her bird, and she goes, oh, uh, if you want more, you can. She reached under the bird and she pulled a whole handful. I no, 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 I'll take them, but I just wanted to see if anybody's still spinning yucca. The yucca they have is very large leaf, and it's maguey. Have you ever heard of maguey? It's a big old broad thing, and they beat it with a wooden hammer to extract the cordage. I watched the maguey. I wanted to see somebody still spinning, and nobody in that whole market spun yucca anymore. Um, which was it hurt. Um, so when I had an opportunity to speak with a coalition of women, I said, what I see in your culture right now is what happened to us. We got so assimilated that we forgot that we have all this technology and we're losing it. We can go to the store and buy synthetic material, but it will never be as good as what we used in the ancient times. The strength of yucca is it has the highest level of tensile strength over a lot of plants, even cotton. And it's just an amazing plant, along with these turkey feather blankets. Rabbit fur, remember how it used to shed? Once it got old, you're like, oh darn, my I've got fur. You left it all over like your cat. But turkey feather blankets, if you don't let Mothra get it, it will last you to your lifetime. So they stored them special. And Okay, at Matt's, at Coronado, you see that beautiful uh, kind of semi reconstruction of the village. Well, remember the bottom chambers are storage units, so they're dark and cool. In the summer they're cool, and in the winter they stay kind of warm because ground temperature at 3 feet below stays at 51 degrees, I think. So here was this perfect storage unit. And if you enclosed it with mud, 3 foot thick mud walls aren't going to let Mothra in. So they would store their winter stuff in those along with corn and seeds and everything else. So the rats don't get in there. So this is how this preservation of this important blanket was to the Pueblo people. The other thing was, remember when Coronado comes, what is he taking from the village? Not women, not children, not food, the blanket. So, you know, because his army's freezing. So a lot of the highland villages had these blankets, and thank God to be an archaeologist in New Mexico, because our dry climate allows us to see textiles and perishable items that other states or other places aren't being able to look at and study. So again, that relationship between being an archaeologist, being an Indian, and being, I love to eat turkey. Just kidding. It's just that it all came together, and like I said, I have nothing but gratitude for Creator who's putting me on this path, and I accept my journey. Um, so I'm still learning more and more about these birds. I've learned about tools along the way because the this blanket, it didn't like the steel tools. It liked tools made from bone. So a lot of my awls and a lot of my tools are deer antlers, and they're already smooth and round, and they will actually fit into the yucca cordage, and it doesn't hang it up. When you use steel on this, if you looked at the metal all underneath a microscope, you would see these small barbs of metal that you can't really see with your eye or feel with your skin. But boy, it hangs on to the yucca. And caught myself fighting. But with this, it just slides right in and right out. So my preferable tools are bone tools. And thank God, working with the Office of Archeological Study, where you learn how to use bones. I've got musical instrument. There's so much. Can you hear that? So everybody says, "Oh, that's a cool design on that." I said, "Yeah, what's a grid cornfield, but it's also my music." And I put a flake right here, and I take notches off. And it's my billet for flint knapping. And when the grandkids aren't good, just kidding. There's so many things um, that my ancestors gave to us that I'm so appreciative of. I really cannot say enough about the gifts that they give, because uh, I've learned so much. Uh, well, I've lost my bone tool. In working with the perishable projects program, with Lori Ware, who's a textile expert, and Luis Garcia, who's a well-known weaver, bringing back old designs and old technologies, working with cotton that he grows himself. Um, and the Hopi weavers and the Zuni weavers. Um, I've gotten the opportunity to go into certain collections, like at the Edge of Cedars, um, different museums, and see what is left of the turkey feather blankets. So a lot of times, all you're getting is this. I don't know if you can see that, but it is all that's left. So what's wrapped around here are quills, and it looks like hishi. So trying to figure out exactly how this blanket was made was a trick. It was fun. And then here's one that still had feathers on it, but just had that hole where the bugs kind of got to it. So I got to see these blankets. And one of the things was, well, how did you hide that quill? Because if you look at this thing is sharp and pointy, this quill, and it's hard. So we figured out by looking and we couldn't take one apart. That would be like, oh my God, don't do that. So we you don't want that quill against your body. So you're going to hide that quill inside of here. I'll use this white feather. So this quill goes inside, see that? The first quill. And then you're going to wrap this around, and that quill is going to be underneath this fluff. So now I've hidden that quill. I can't even feel it. And once COVID's over, I'd gladly come out and demonstrate this for y'all. I mean, you have to see it to really understand it. I know this is hard to do, but um, it's such a neat trick. And then the second quill will come in and they'll keep winding back that way. The first quill goes this way, then the second quill and others that follow go this other way. So that way you don't feel that quill on your body. All you feel is this nice fur, this down. It's already warming up. I've had it on my leg and it's like woof, you know. But so I have, you can see the thickness of this. So warp, and this is the thinner weft. So I had to spin 190 feet to make a 2-foot by 3-foot blanket, and then cover the 190 feet with turkey feathers. The feather only covers about maybe a quarter of an inch of that rope, one feather. So I counted the number of feathers on this blanket, which is 2 foot by 3 foot, which is going to be at the Mayak, and it took 17,000 feathers. And then I had to spin this a different gauge. So this is 200 feet of, so that I can weave it together with this. It took 18 months to create a 2 foot by 3 foot blanket. Again, the yucca was the easiest part. It was the gathering of the feathers. Because I don't have the herds, but I had friends, I had allies, I had people sending me feathers. So again, I was, Creator wanted it done. So I didn't even ask for these things, they just came. So, I know that there's a reason, and I accept it. So then I started getting, remember I showed you that white feather, these white feathers? So you figure these domestic birds had to exhibit some form of albinoism, right? So one of the most beautiful blankets I saw was at the Edge of Cedars, and it looked like it was all dark brown and black, but with these white spots in it. So you're saying, well, how did they get those white spots, and why would they put that in there? That was decoration. And then I looked at my blanket and I said, man, that's plain. How boring. You know, how can I? So, what I'm going to do next is mess around with putting these white feathers in. And what we found out was they would spin all their warp cord, right? And then wind it around a loom, you know, up and down. And as they wound it around that loom, wherever they wanted to put, once they had it all wound around, whatever width and length the blanket was going to be, they would get red ochre and grind it and then paint it on the cordage where they wanted those white feathers. So every time they would see red ochre on here, then they would add a white feather. So you would have this string of dark feathers and then have a white feather on here. When you went to put it on the loom for its last time so that you could weave it together, you had to line all those feathers up to create your design. All those white feathers, remember? Because they're all spread out, right? Until you put them together, and then you'll have a white design in there. So that's how they did those dots. I thought that was ingenious. So I'm going to try that next. I'm going to mess around. That's why I'm starting to collect white turkey feathers. So I may be crazy, but I have, it's just something that I think I need to achieve. It'll be my next step. Are there any questions or anything so far, or did I?
Did they wash these blankets or were they too delicate to be washed?
No, they got washed with that yucca root
Oh,
because
okay.
because remember yucca root doesn't harm anything. And when I made these when I got these turkeys, remember they were killed, they had blood, they had fecal, they were outside on the ground, you know. What I did is when I went to soak them, I used the yucca water.
Mm.
So I kept some of the water after I would scrape the leaves and it would have the suds in it already. So that's how I washed my feathers before I put them on this blanket. Can you imagine it being in the museum with all that stuff on it?
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, Mary, first of all, thank you so much. And what a labor of love this is in terms of putting um, your talent and your passion and your interest into reviving this style. And you said you're training people, teaching people this way. Are there other people that have taken this up and are making blankets for them, their family members or themselves, or just practicing and learning this technique?
There's one gentleman from San Ildefonso who's going to attempt to make another one. He calls me and I'm sort of mentoring him and I'm glad. Um, so so far nobody's taking the full task. I'm still on, but like I said, there's an interest. There never was an interest, and that's what you want is someone, you know. And what I did is I I kind of quit working with high school and mid school. I went down to the pre-K and I went into first and second and third grade. And the other day, when I was picking pinon, my cousin's dating this girl, and there's this young man who's about 10 or 11 years old with them, and he says, "I know you. You're that lady that comes to the school." He goes, "I make yucca string for my grandma now because I learned from you. And my grandma told me if I ever saw you to say thank you, Kunda." And she really like that I'm teaching her how to make this yucca cordage. And I said, well, what class were you in? He goes, oh, I was, and he's 10 years old. Oh, I was a little kid when you taught me. So he was like maybe 5 or 6. So there it is, that planted seed. They're the ones who have fun playing. I remember Matt's kids having a blast with me when they were little. And
Well, and I put in the chat, Mary, I'm going to work with Sherry. And we're going to try to maybe see if you can do like a workshop maybe for the friends on site. You kind of open the door. So we'll see about having you out sometime this spring. She is an amazing gem. And I learned, she came on to do archaeology with us, but I think everybody with the Office of Archeological Studies, and I had a chance to work with her on a number of projects down at Cook's Peak, down at the Civic Center. I learned so much about indigenous lifeways based on what Mary could tell. And my kids absolutely loved it, but I've learned so much as well. And it's really an honor and a blessing to have her on this call today, sharing with you guys all of her knowledge. With that said, thank you very much, Mary. I'll let you guys ask some more questions, but I'm heading back out. Thank you, and it's good to see you, even if it's over the computer.
always a pleasure, Matt Barber, my brother.
Okay, we had a note from Mary Barrell that you did a great job, and thank you so much for your presentation. Mary, it was a delight. I'm so glad to finally, get to know you, meet you on Zoom, and I'm really, really looking forward to your coming out to the site to work with us and show us these kinds of things. Because, as docents, we talk about that turkey feather blanket and the fact that the people raise turkeys and things like that. I had no idea about plucking them, that the new feather grew back so fast. I was sort of thinking they had a bunch of naked turkeys running around all summer. So you've certainly set me straight. Well, Mary, thank you again so much. And we hope to see you soon out at the site. Well, we all hope to see each other out at the site.
Yeah, exactly, man.
All right. Thank you so much.
Good to you. Everybody have a beautiful evening, and thank you for allowing me to, give this presentation. I absolutely appreciate it, and I love Coronado. I really do.
Thank you. Thank you so much.